What would you do if someone stole every single child from your world and then told you to sit down and be quiet about it? What if the ones who took them were so powerful, so ancient, so terrifying that sending a fleet would be suicide and doing nothing would be surrender? Now imagine this. Humanity didn't do either. They did something no civilization in the galaxy had ever seen before, and it changed everything. If this kind of story gets your blood pumping, do me a quick favor. Smash that like button right now, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with someone who loves a good sci-fi story. Trust me, they'll thank you later. Now let's get into it. It was a quiet night on the moon. The kind of night where the communications officers at the United Earth listening station barely had anything to do. Routine signals, cargo manifests, navigation updates from deep space. Nothing interesting, nothing urgent. Lieutenant Mara Osai was halfway through her shift when her console lit up in a color she had never seen before in her 5 years on the job. Red. Not the usual amber alerts or the yellow caution flags. This was deep red. The kind that meant something had gone very, very wrong somewhere far away. She pulled the signal. It was from a colony vessel called the Perseverance, a ship carrying families, settlers, people building a new life on a planet at the edge of the Kepler corridor. The signal was short, less than a minute long, and it wasn't a message in any traditional sense. There were no words at first, just sound, raw, unfiltered, horrifying sound. Children screaming, hundreds of them, their voices layered over each other in a wall of terror that made Mara's hands freeze over her console. The screaming lasted about 20 seconds, then it stopped. Not faded, not tapered off. It stopped like someone had pressed a button. And then came silence. Deep, total, suffocating silence that somehow felt louder than the screaming. And then a voice, cold, mechanical, alien, not a human voice, not anything close to a human voice. It spoke in perfect, precise English, which somehow made it worse. "We have taken your young ones. This is a message about your position in the natural hierarchy of this galaxy. You will not respond. You will not pursue. Any further expansion into the Kepler corridor will result in identical consequences. You exist here because we permit it. Guests do not grow beyond their boundaries. Guests do not spread beyond what they are given. Be thankful we allowed the adults to live." Then nothing. The signal ended. The console went back to its steady blinking. The room was perfectly still. Mara stared at the screen for what felt like a very long time. Her coffee sat untouched beside her. She picked up the priority line and called the one person on Earth who needed to hear this before anyone else. Secretary General Adama Lo was asleep when the call came. She was awake within seconds. She listened to the full recording without interrupting. 47 seconds of audio that would change the trajectory of human civilization. When it finished, she asked one question. "Who did this?" "We believe it's the VTH Dominion, ma'am." There was a pause, a beat of silence that carried more weight than any words could. "Get me Admiral Chen, and contact Dr. Vasquez. Tell her I need the quiet team, the one without a designation." "Which division should I route this through?" "None of them. This doesn't go through any division. This goes through me." The VTH Dominion was not a small problem. It wasn't a rogue faction or a pirate fleet or some upstart alien civilization flexing its muscles. The Dominion was old, ancient. 6,000 years of unbroken expansion across 43 star systems. They had been building empires before humans had figured out agriculture. Their warships were massive, bioorganic constructs that moved through space like living creatures. Their soldiers wore armor that was grown, not manufactured, fused from biological compounds that could absorb kinetic impacts that would shatter steel. Their command structure was rigid, hierarchical, and ruthlessly efficient. In 6 millennia, the Dominion had conquered 11 species. 4 of those species no longer existed, not relocated, not subjugated, erased, gone from the galactic record as if they had never been. The Dominion didn't just defeat its enemies. It absorbed them or deleted them, depending on how useful they were. Humanity, in the Dominion's estimation, was barely worth noticing. 40 years of interstellar travel, 17 colony systems, a military that was, by galactic standards, laughably small. The Dominion had watched humans spread into the Kepler corridor the way a predator watches a small animal wander into open ground. Amusing, irrelevant, easily corrected if necessary. And now they had decided it was necessary. 312 children, taken from Perseverance Colony in what appeared to be a flawless mill. Itery operation. No casualties among the adults, no damage to the colony infrastructure, just the children removed cleanly and completely like a surgeon excising a tumor. It was a message, a demonstration. The Dominion had done this before with other species. Take something precious. Let the victim sit with the loss, wait for the desperation to build, then offer terms. The victim always accepted the terms. Always. Because what choice did they have? The Dominion was too powerful, too ancient, too deeply entrenched in the fabric of galactic power. Fighting them was suicide. Ignoring them was impossible. The only option was to bend, to submit, to accept your place in the order of things and be grateful for whatever scraps of dignity they allowed you to keep. That was how it had always worked. For 6,000 years, across 11 conquered civilizations, that was how it had always worked. But the Dominion had made an error, a fundamental, catastrophic error. They had studied humanity's technology. They had analyzed humanity's military capability. They had assessed humanity's political structure, its economic output, its population growth, its territorial ambitions. They had done their homework. But they had not studied humanity's history. If they had, they would have known something that every human being learns in childhood. There is nothing more dangerous than a parent who has lost a child. Admiral Yuki Chen was 61 years old and looked like she could command a room just by walking into it. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence alone carried the kind of authority that made generals sit up straighter and intelligence officers double-check their reports. She stood at the head of a long table aboard a ship called the Awaken. This ship did not officially exist. It appeared in no registry. It was referenced in no budget. 17 separate international agreements specifically denied its existence. The people in this room were similar. Officially, most of them were retired, dead, or reassigned to positions that didn't actually exist. There were 12 of them, military strategists, intelligence directors, scientists, engineers. The best minds humanity had produced, gathered in a room that the rest of the species didn't know about, to discuss a situation that most of the species didn't yet fully understand. General Marcus Webb, who commanded ground forces, was the first to speak. 312 children, ages 4 to 17, taken approximately 11 hours ago. The adults were left untouched. The colony is intact. This was surgical. Dr. Amara Vasquez leaned forward. She was small, soft-spoken, and dressed in civilian clothes. She had no rank because she had never needed one. Everyone in this room knew who she was and what she was capable of. The Dominion communicates through action. They don't negotiate with words. They negotiate with demonstrations. Taking the children was their opening statement. They expect us to respond with either military force, which they're prepared for, or diplomatic submission, which is what they actually want. They've positioned 3 carrier groups along the Kepler corridor, Colonel Diane Park added. She ran intelligence operations that had no official name. If we send a fleet, they engage, they destroy us, they keep the children, and they've proven their point. If we send diplomats, they make us wait months before even agreeing to talk. Then they set terms we can't refuse. So we don't send either, Admiral Chen said quietly. The room went still. She moved to the main display and pulled up a star map. The Kepler corridor glowed in blue. Dominion positions were marked in red. 3 massive carrier groups, positioned like walls across every viable approach. And then on the far side of the display, barely visible, a single pulsing green marker. Nobody outside this room knew what that marker represented. Chen looked around the table. I'm activating the silence protocol. You know that feeling when a story hits you so hard you forget to breathe for a second? That's the kind of content we make on this channel. If you're feeling that right now, tap the like button. It tells the algorithm to show this to more people who need to hear it. And if you're new here, subscribe and hit that bell. You don't want to miss what's coming next. The Silence Protocol, 11 years in development. Born from the ashes of something called the Vega Incident, an event so classified that even mentioning it in government circles would get you escorted out of the room. Whatever had happened at Vega, whatever humanity had lost there, it had changed something fundamental in the species' approach to survival. Not louder, not bigger, not more aggressive, quieter, smarter, more patient. For 11 years, a small team of humanity's most brilliant minds had been building something. Not a weapon exactly, not a computer program, not a virus or a bomb or a fleet of warships. It was harder to define than any of those things, and far more dangerous. They called it Whisper, and Whisper had spent 11 years learning to speak the language of the Vorath Dominion's nervous system. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy ran on information. Communication networks, sensor grids, navigation arrays, command and control systems. The more advanced the civilization, the more deeply woven these systems were into every aspect of their existence. Military operations, political governance, economic function, social infrastructure. Everything depended on the seamless flow of data. The Vorath Dominion, with its 6,000 years of technological development, was the most deeply networked civilization humanity had ever encountered. Their entire empire ran on something called the Vorath Continuum, a faster-than-light data lattice that connected all 43 star systems in real time. Every ship, every station, every ground installation, every command post was linked through this network. It was the spine of their civilization, the blood flowing through their veins. Without it, their fleet couldn't coordinate. Their supply chains would collapse. Their command hierarchy would go dark. They would be 43 isolated systems instead of one unified empire. Whisper had been designed to speak to the continuum, not to destroy it, not to shut it down. Something far more elegant than that, something far more terrifying. On the far side of the galaxy, in a chamber that had stood for 4,000 years, the grand conclave of the Vorath Dominion was meeting. The Hall of Unbroken Victory was exactly what it sounded like, a monument to 6 millennia of dominance. Its walls were lined with the banners and trophies of every species the Dominion had conquered, absorbed, or destroyed. 11 civilizations reduced to decorations on stone walls. Grand Commander Sithrakva presided over the conclave from the head of a massive table, surrounded by 43 senior commanders representing every system in the empire. He was satisfied. The operation against the human colony had gone perfectly. The children were secured at a facility called Cow Station. They were fed, comfortable, and completely beyond any possibility of human rescue. The human fleet had not moved. The carrier groups reported nothing unusual. No military activity, no unusual communications, nothing. The humans were frozen, paralyzed by the simple, brutal math of their situation. They couldn't fight, they couldn't run, they could only wait and eventually accept. Sithrakva allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. In 6 months, the humans would send diplomats. He would make them wait 3 months before agreeing to speak. Then he would set terms. The Kepler corridor would be sealed. Human expansion would be restricted to their original 17 systems forever, and the children would be returned as a gesture of magnanimity, traumatized, changed, but alive. It was how the Dominion had always done things: clean, efficient, final. Sithrakva was in the middle of this pleasant calculation when the lights went out. Not dimmed, not flickered, out total darkness. Absolute and complete throughout the entire Hall of Unbroken Victory. His personal communication implant embedded beneath the skin at the base of his skull should have provided a backup connection. An emergency light, a distress signal, something. It gave him nothing. Dead silence. No signal, no connection, nothing. The backup power systems should have engaged within a fraction of a second. They were designed with triple redundancy. They had never failed in 4,000 years. They did not engage. The hall remained dark. In that darkness, 43 of the most powerful military commanders in the known galaxy sat perfectly still, not because they were calm, because every one of them had been trained from birth that when you don't know what you're facing, you don't move. You wait, you assess, you survive. Then the screens came back on, not the tactical displays, not the star maps or the status readouts or the strategic overlays. Those stayed dark. What activated were the small personal display units embedded in each commander's position at the table. Private screens meant for confidential communications during formal sessions. Every single one of them showed the same image. A human face, female, silver hair pulled back with sharp precision, eyes that were dark and completely, utterly calm. Grand Commander Sithrakva, my name is Admiral Yuki Chen of the United Earth Space Forces. I'm going to speak to you now and you're going to listen. In about 45 seconds, you'll understand why listening is the only option available to you. Please don't try to cut this feed. You can't. Please don't try to contact your fleet. You can't do that either. Sithrakva reached for his comm implant. Nothing. The commander to his left tried hers. Nothing. Around the table, 43 hands made 43 identical gestures and received 43 identical results. Silence, isolation, disconnection from everything they had ever relied upon. On the screens, Admiral Chen continued. I want to talk about your continuum, specifically about the 17-hour maintenance window your engineering core runs every 42 days to recalibrate your faster-than-light relay nodes. During that window, you push security updates to your encryption lattice. It's a beautifully designed system. We spent 9 years learning how to read it. We spent 2 more years learning how to write in it. She paused. Let the silence do its work. We wrote something last night. The silence in the hall of unbroken victory shifted. It became something heavier, something alive. 43 brilliant military minds were performing calculations, running scenarios, arriving one by one at conclusions they desperately did not want to reach. Approximately 4 hours ago, every ship in the Vorath Dominion fleet received a routine navigation update through standard continuum channels. The update originated from Fleet Command Station Aranath. It used your own authentication protocols, your own encryption signatures, your own command verification codes. Your ships accepted it without hesitation. Why would they question it? It came from inside your own system. Another pause, longer this time. That update contains a dormant package. It's sitting in the navigation core of every vessel in your fleet larger than a scout craft right now. All 4,217 of them. It will remain dormant indefinitely, unless we choose to activate it. If we activate it, every ship in your fleet will simultaneously receive new navigational instructions across all 43 systems, faster than any countermand you could issue. Those instructions will take your ships wherever we want them to go. Ever been watching something and felt a chill run through you? That's the power of a great story. If you're feeling it right now, drop a comment below telling me what you think humanity should have done. I read every single comment and I love hearing your thoughts. Now let's keep going because this is about to get even more intense. Sithrakva did not panic, he was Dominion. 6,000 years of military doctrine flowed through his veins, he assessed. If what this human was saying was true, then the entire Dominion fleet was compromised, had been compromised for 4 hours, and no one had noticed, because the compromise hadn't come from outside. It had come through the most trusted channels in the Empire, channels that had never been breached, not once, not in 6,000 years. He looked at the face on the screen. He studied it the way he had studied 1,000 enemies across 100 conflicts, and he realized something that settled in his chest like ice water. She wasn't bluffing. There was no bravado in her expression, no triumph, no anger, just calm. The calm of someone who had already done the hardest part and was now simply explaining what had happened. We don't want your fleet, Admiral Chen said, as if reading his thoughts across the void of space. We don't want your territory. We don't want your technology or your resources. We don't want your submission. We want our children, all 312 of them, unharmed. Return to Perseverance colony within 72 hours. She leaned slightly forward. Return our children, and this package disappears. Every copy, every trace. We will never speak of this conversation. The Kepler corridor remains open for human colonization, and we establish a formal diplomatic channel so that future disagreements can be resolved without anyone taking anyone's children. She straightened. That is our complete list of demands. We have no others. A final pause. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Or don't return them, and find out where we send your fleet. The screens went dark. In the Hall of Unbroken Victory, beneath the banners of 11 conquered civilizations, 43 Dominion commanders sat in absolute silence. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on them like gravity from a dying star. Sithrakva sat for a long time. He was thinking, not about tactics, not about counter-strategies, not about the military implications. He was thinking about something he had never had to think about before in his entire career. He was thinking about what it felt like to be the one without options. Finally, he spoke. His voice was very quiet. Find me a way to communicate with the humans, any channel, any method. Find one that still works. It took them 6 hours. 6 hours of searching through a communication infrastructure that had been systematically, surgically silenced. Military channels were dead. Government frequencies were dead. Emergency bands were dead. Fleet command was unreachable. System governors were unreachable. The continuum itself was foo. Enceadioning, the Dominion could still operate internally, but every outward-facing communication channel, every frequency, every protocol that could reach human space had been shut down. Except one, a commercial trade relay, a civilian merchant network node on the outer edge of Dominion space. It was still active, still functioning, like a single phone left ringing in an empty building. The symbolism was obvious and deliberate. The humans had left them exactly one way to call, and it was the most humble, most undignified channel available. When the call came through to the Akaran, Colonel Park almost smiled. They used the merchant relay. Admiral Chen nodded. Of course they did. It's the only door we left unlocked. Put them through. Sithrakva's face appeared on the display. He was composed, controlled. Every line of his features held in the rigid discipline of a being who had ruled star systems. But Chen had spent 30 years reading people. She could see past the discipline. She could see past the control. He was afraid, not of her personally, not of humanity in the abstract. He was afraid of something deeper. He was afraid of the unknown. Of a species that had done something impossible, and done it so quietly that his entire civilization hadn't felt a thing until the moment she chose to reveal it. That was the real weapon, not the package sitting in his fleet's navigation cores. The patience, the silence, the 11 years of preparation that had led to this single, perfect moment. Admiral Chen, he said. His translator rendered his voice in flat, precise English. I am authorized to discuss the terms you have proposed. There's nothing to discuss, Chen said pleasantly, almost warmly. The terms are the terms. I stated them completely. Do you accept them? A pause. I have questions regarding verification. Reasonable. Once the children are confirmed safe on Perseverance Colony, we'll provide full remote access to our system so you can verify the package removal yourself. We want you to be able to verify it. This should be the beginning of trust, not the end of it. Another pause, longer, heavier. You mentioned a diplomatic channel. We did. We've always wanted one. You never considered us worth the conversation. That is correct, Sithrakva said. There was no apology in his voice, just fact. I know, Chen said. This conversation is partly about changing that assessment. Sithrakva studied her through the screen. His eyes held something ancient. 6,000 years of institutional memory looking out through a single pair of pupils. And what Chen saw in those eyes was not hatred. It wasn't contempt. It wasn't even anger. It was something more complicated. Something like vertigo. The feeling of looking over the edge of a cliff and not being able to see the bottom. "What are you?" he asked. It was a genuine question, not rhetorical, not threatening. He truly wanted to know. Chen considered it. "We're human beings," she said. "We're very young compared to you. We're frightened a lot of the time. We make terrible decisions almost as often as we make good ones. But we love our children with a completeness that leaves no room for anything else. And anyone who threatens that love discovers very quickly what's underneath all the fear." She let the words settle. "You have 66 hours remaining. I'd recommend using them wisely." She ended the transmission. Here's the thing about stories like this one. They remind us what matters. They remind us what we're capable of when the things we love are on the line. If this story is hitting you in the chest the way it's hitting me, share it. Send the link to a friend. Post it somewhere. Let's get this story in front of more people who need to hear it. The children arrived at Perseverance Colony in 61 hours. Every single one. 312 children aboard 2 Dominion transport vessels. A single Dominion frigate escorted them to the edge of the atmosphere and then immediately turned and departed. No speeches. No ceremony. No attempts to frame the return as a gesture of goodwill or generosity. Just the transports descending through the clouds and landing in the colony's main agricultural field, because it was the only space large enough to receive ships of that size. The cargo ramps lowered, and the children walked out. They walked into the afternoon light of a world that smelled like wheat and warm soil, and something they had been afraid they would never smell again. They stood there blinking in the sunlight, some of them holding hands, some of them looking around with wide eyes that hadn't adjusted yet to the brightness. And then the adults came running. Parents, guardians, teachers, neighbors, everyone. They came from every direction, crossing the field at a dead sprint, and the sound that rose from that place was something that no alien language in the galaxy had a word for. It was grief and relief and love and fear and joy and rage and gratitude. And 100 other things all compressed into a single, raw, human sound that echoed across the wheat fields and carried into the sky. On the Acheron, Admiral Chen watched the reunion on satellite feed. She said nothing for a very long time. Beside her, Dr. Vasquez watched the same images. Small figures running across golden fields, children being swept up into arms that would not let go. "Do we honor the agreement?" Vasquez asked quietly. "The package removal, every copy, every trace." "Exactly as promised," Chen said without looking away from the screen. "We said what we meant. We meant what we said. That's how trust gets built." Even with the Dominion. Especially with the Dominion. Chen finally turned from the display. "They're going to spend the next decade tearing their continuum apart trying to find other packages. They won't find any because there aren't any, but the search itself will keep them occupied. And while they're looking inward, we'll be building outward. Diplomatic relationships, trade agreements, connections with the 11 species they conquered." Vasquez was quiet for a moment. "You planned beyond the children." Chen's expression shifted. Something fierce moved behind her eyes. "The children came first. They always came first. Everything after that is just cause and effect, action and consequence." She glanced at the star map glowing softly on the secondary display. 43 Dominion systems, 11 conquered species, a galaxy that was watching. The Dominion thinks of power as something you accumulate and hold, a finite resource. You take it from others and you grip it tight and you never let go. We think about it differently. How? As infrastructure, you build it. Then you build more on top of it. Then it grows and keeps growing. They've been holding the same power for 6,000 years. We've been building for 40. She looked back at the wheat field on the screen where parents still held children in their arms and the light was turning gold. "We're just getting started." The story spread the way important truths always spread. Slowly at first. through whispers and rumors and fragments of overheard conversations. A Dominion trade envoy at a diplomatic reception on Keth Station had too much of something that served the same function as alcohol, and the story came spilling out of him like water through a cracked dam. He hadn't meant to tell anyone, but some things are too heavy to carry in silence. The KTH Consortium, a federation of 7 species along the galaxy's inner arm, heard the story and didn't believe it. They spent 3 months investigating. They sent probes into Dominion space. They interviewed merchant captains who had noticed strange irregularities in their navigation systems on a specific Tuesday, anomalies that lasted about 4 hours before correcting themselves. They pulled sensor data from relay stations along the Kepler corridor. Everything checked out. The story was true. Every impossible, terrifying detail of it was true. Humanity had walked into the nervous system of the most powerful military empire in the explored galaxy. They had left a message written in the Dominion's own language, delivered through the Dominion's own channels, using the Dominion's own security protocols. And the Dominion had read that message and done the only thing they could do. They had given back what they took. The Consortium sent a diplomatic mission to Earth. It was the first direct contact between the Consortium and humanity. The lead envoy was a tall, multi-limbed being called Shivari, who communicated partly through subsonic vibration and partly through carefully learned English. She arrived at the United Earth Council chambers and spent considerable time on formal greetings before getting to her real question. "We want to understand you," Shivari said through her translation device. "What you did, how you did it, but more importantly, why you stopped where you stopped. You had control of their fleet. You could have sent it anywhere. You could have used it to seize the corridor for yourself. You could have used it to dismantle the Dominion entirely. You chose not to. We want to understand why." The Secretary General of the United Earth Council, a different person now than the one who had taken that first call years earlier, thought carefully before answering. "Because we didn't want dominance. We wanted our children back." Those are not mutually exclusive goals. No, they're not. But the moment you use a capability like that for anything beyond protection, you become something different. Something we've decided we don't want to be. Shivari was quiet. The subsonic vibrations she emitted shifted to a frequency that the Council's linguistic AI identified as something between deep thought and unease. "You built a tool powerful enough to end the Dominion as a functioning empire," she said slowly. "And you used it only to retrieve 312 children. And you removed it." "We removed it from the Dominion systems," the Secretary General corrected gently. "The capability itself still exists. It will always exist." "That's the point," Shivari said, understanding now. "Yes, that's the point. You want the galaxy to know you could. We want the galaxy to know we could and that we chose not to, and that we would very much prefer to be friends with everyone in it." The Secretary General folded her hands on the table. "But yes, they need to know we could. You know what separates a good story from a great one? A great one makes you feel something you carry with you after it's over. If this story is doing that for you right now, leave a like. It takes less than a second and it means the world to this channel. And if you've made it this far, you're exactly the kind of viewer I make these for. Let's finish this together." The VTH Dominion did not collapse. It did not fracture or splinter or descend into civil war. It was too old and too structured for that. But it changed. Slowly, reluctantly, with the kind of deep, grinding resistance that ancient things always show when forced to adapt. A formal diplomatic channel was established between the Dominion and Earth, exactly as agreed. Trade negotiations began within a year, and then something remarkable happened. The Dominion began withdrawing forces from 2 of the 11 species it had conquered, not because any treaty required it, not because anyone demanded it, but because the math had shifted. Holding 11 civilizations by force was enormously expensive. It had always been expensive. The Dominion had afforded it because no one had ever made them question whether the cost was worth paying. Humanity had made them question it, not through force, through demonstration, through the simple, devastating proof that dominance through power alone was a house built on sand. Because there would always be someone, somewhere, who found a way to reach inside your walls without you knowing. The children of Perseverance Colony grew up. They went to schools. They fell in love. They built careers. They had children of their own. Most of them, when asked about those 61 hours aboard a Dominion transport, said roughly the same thing, that they had been frightened, then confused. Then, when the ramp lowered and they smelled the wheat field and heard voices they knew, overwhelmed by something so big and so deep that they couldn't find words for it, even years later. One of those children, a girl who had been 7 when she was taken, and who grew up to become one of humanity's most respected xenodiplomats, was asked late in her career what she thought about what humanity had done to bring her home. She thought about it for a long time. The interviewer waited. "We didn't send an army," she said finally. "My mother told me that when I was old enough to understand. She said that when they took us, humanity looked at the problem the way it looks at all problems, practically, without ego, without the need to be seen doing something dramatic. They asked one question: what do we actually need? We need the children back, safe, with the least possible loss of life, and the greatest possible chance that this never happens again." She paused, and then they built exactly the thing that achieved exactly that result, and nothing more. The interviewer leaned forward. "The Dominion expected rage." "The Dominion expected rage," she confirmed. "They understood rage. They had been dealing with rage for 6,000 years. Every species they conquered had raged against them. Armies, fleets, desperate, furious, doomed attacks against an empire that was designed to absorb rage and use it to justify further conquest. That's what rage gave them: justification." She shook her head slowly. "What they got from us instead was patience, precision, silence, and a species that had decided quietly a long time ago that if this moment ever came, they were going to be ready for it. Not ready with bigger guns or more ships. Ready with something the Dominion had never encountered before. Something they had no defense against." What was that? Restraint backed by capability. The willingness to build something terrible and then not use it. To hold it. To wait. For years, for a decade, for however long it took. And then when the moment came, to use it with surgical precision, achieve exactly the necessary outcome and stop. That's what terrified them. Not the weapon, not the technology, the discipline. "Is that what humanity is?" the interviewer asked. "Disciplined?" The diplomat smiled. It was a complicated smile, shaped by 60 years of life in a galaxy that was still trying to figure out what humanity was. Humanity is a species that will wait as long as it has to, love as fiercely as it can, build as quietly as it must, and when something we love is threatened, when something irreplaceable is taken from us. She paused, and the silence held the way. GHT of everything she had lived through, everything she had become, everything her species had proven in the dark between the stars. "We don't get angry, we get to work, and we don't stop until the work is done." Somewhere across the galaxy, on 43 worlds, in the deep architecture of an ancient civilization's nervous system, there was no longer any trace of what had once been placed there. The package was gone, every copy, every fragment, exactly as promised, but the memory remained. Memory always remains. On VTH Prime, in the Hall of Unbroken Victory, the banners of 11 conquered species still hung on the walls, but 2 of those walls were bare now, where banners had been taken down. Not torn down, carefully removed, folded, stored, as if the Dominion was beginning to acknowledge, slowly, painfully, that victory wasn't the only thing worth commemorating. And in the wheat fields of Perseverance Colony, in the long golden light of a late afternoon, 312 people who had once been children walked through the grain with their own sons and daughters beside them. Small hands reaching up to hold larger ones. Bare feet pressing into soil that was warm from the sun. The air smelled like earth and growing things, and the particular sweetness that wheat gives off when the afternoon light hits it just right. It smelled like home. And somewhere out in the vast darkness between the stars, in the spaces where civilizations rise and fall, and the galaxy turns in its slow, eternal spiral, a lesson had been learned. A lesson that would echo through the corridors of power on 100 worlds for generations to come. Do not take what humans love, because humanity does not send armies. Humanity does not send fleets. Humanity does not rage or roar or throw itself against your walls. Humanity sends something far worse than any of those things. It sends patience. It sends precision. It sends the quiet, relentless, unstoppable will of a species that has decided it is done being afraid. And by the time you realize what's happening, it's already over. The only question left is whether you're wise enough to give back what you took. The Dominion was wise enough. Barely, just barely, and the galaxy never forgot it. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, then you already know what to do. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear that patience and love can be the most powerful weapons in the universe. I'll see you in the next one. And remember, the best stories aren't about who has the biggest army. They're about who has the strongest reason to fight and the wisdom to know when fighting isn't the answer.